evening, everybody. And thank you so much for being here. I think we are all aware that we have a very tough act to follow. So thanks so much for being here. So it's my privilege to introduce you to these three entrepreneurs who have outstandingly stellar business careers, no question. All of you would know that. They've taken the germ of an idea, they've nurtured, grown it into large, successful businesses. But I think what binds them together is not really just what they've done in building those businesses, but in also finding very eager and very profitable exits for their companies, which, as all of you would know, is one of the milestones for startup entrepreneurship. So I think we should hear it for these three great entrepreneurs who've also recorded stellar exits. It's not an easy thing to do, I can assure you. And if you think that's the only commonality between them, there's more coming. When was the last time that you met a unicorn founder, a successful entrepreneur, who's also an author? And in the case of two of them, of the three, not just once, but twice over. So ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our stellar panel. So I think, without really wasting too much more time, I thought we could just get to hear from them, really. And they'll talk to us about the things that they do best, which is both build businesses and write. So, Hema, I thought we'd begin with you. Do you need to be a reader to be a good writer?
I certainly think so. Very simply because it gives you a whole bunch of ideas. You get ideas on style and structure, sometimes on substance. And I think in this day and age, with the kind of proliferation of media that you have, you also very quickly get to know what is already out there. So especially if you're planning your first book, I have just one book. So when I was about to write it, I was very, very keen that I should find out what works, what doesn't work. In fact, some of the books that I read told me what I shouldn't do and what style I shouldn't adopt. So Archana, yeah, I think it really helps. Of course, it depends so much on what you're going to write. Like my book was about my journey and my story. So I thought I knew everything that should go into it. But getting a little, ideation from other styles and structures really helped make the book a lot more refined than it would have been otherwise.
Mukesh, I remember you mentioning in a previous conversation that, you went, you read a lot of business biographies, Akio Morita, I remember you mentioning, Sam Walton, and so on. So were they of interest to you? Did that kind of define what you wanted, the stories you wanted to tell?
No, absolutely. So this was in end of second year at college. I think by the time I was a little bit disillusioned. I was 19. I had no idea what I wanted to do because initially you go to college and everyone's studying for exams, etc. And I also wanted good grades. But after third, fourth semester, I started my question: to what end? Like why I'm just doing what everyone else is doing. So I started hanging out in our IIT Kanpur had an incredible library. I would just go there, hang out, keep walking from aisle to aisle. And somehow I just stumbled upon these two, few business biographies, Sam Walton's biography and Akio Morita, Sony's founder. And I was absolutely blown away. I think the idea of, somebody can build an organization which goes from nothing to among the largest companies in the world over 2 or 3 decades, it was like quite eye-opening. I think for me, the dream of entrepreneurship was born, but also, realize that books contain so many ideas, life stories, life lessons. And I think my love for reading was born. And then next 2 years, I spent most of the time reading books, which led to horrible grades. I think I barely passed eventually. But I think, probably I learned something else in return, which hopefully came in handy much later.
The seed of writing perhaps was sown in your mind, perhaps, that's interesting. So Rajesh, you set, as we've been discussing, you set alight, I think, millions of dreams in young Indians when you were the first to sell your internet startup way back in 2000. So what was inspiring for you? How did you move from there in being sort of, someone who set a milestone in an entrepreneurial arena to then writing about it? What was the motivation?
So I've been actually writing since probably the late 90s, early 2000. But all the writing was on a blog. So I'd write pretty much every day, except for the 7 years in between when I worked on the periphery of politics. Um, and then uh, this idea that, and I wrote for myself. So there were no vanity metrics of likes and all of that. And I think along with reading and writing, there is another one, which is the thinking part. And this sort of creates the flywheel.
Yeah,
That
very true.
if you can get this going and create a discipline of writing regularly, ideally
Yeah.
every day. Even now I write on my blog every day. And I find that this is how the ideas churn. And if you forget about who's going to read, what they're going to read, what they're going to comment, I think it's a great way to clarify your own thought process. And the book sort of emerged from some of the writings on the blog. And it sort of built up from there. And if you think of a book as basically sort of 100 blog posts, it's not too difficult to write a book.
My gosh, this is about simplifying something seriously complex. That's interesting. So you write every day. So how many words do you write every day?
So typically it's about 500.
Okay,
And so I'll just edit it a little bit. I publish every day.
okay,
I write and have a buffer. So I don't wake up in the morning and I have tension of what am I going to publish today.
all right.
So I write in advance and keep. But that discipline that I have to have something new every day.
Okay,
It's probably from my early internet habit that, if you had to, if you had to bootstrap a business, I didn't have money to spend getting people in. So I said, I've got to create something which makes them come back to my site every day. How does it become a habit in their lives? And I applied the same logic to my writing, that even if people come, there should be something new. Can they spend a few minutes with me? Every day, can I become a habit for them? So the idea is, even if it's a big idea, break it up into 500 words. It's easy for people to consume also. And you can have something new every day. I'm not waiting for perfection in my writing. Just put it out there, and you can always do iterations later on in a subsequent series.
absolutely.
Thanks for sharing that. In fact, earlier you were talking about how if you don't write, you get all muddled up in your head. And what I learned about this was whatever's in my head, I've really got to put it out there because I wait for structure to appear first and I don't start writing. And so I was telling her that I have a lot of books right in my head but not written yet.
Mukesh, that brings me to the point where you've actually, sort of built two huge startups, selling Myntra in 2014 to such spectacular effect. You've followed it up with Cult, which is as big a success, if not more. Alongside, you've had these two great books come out. So I know you've mentioned discipline, you've spoken of structure. What are the hacks that you use to get your writing done?
So for me, writing, I think I was used to writing, long before I realized I was used to writing because before my entrepreneurial career, I was product manager. As a product manager, what you do is write, this product requirement documents and so on. And I think I tried to write those, it's trying to communicate not only the feature, but also the story, why we are doing it. And I think instinctively I'm doing it because I had this curiosity to learn and ask a little bit of deeper questions of where are we trying to go to, why are we doing this, what exists out there. And I'll start writing those. And I get really good feedback from engineers. When I started in Myntra, it was very confusing for first few years. People will expect clarity from founders and leaders, but I had enough self-awareness to know that I did not have clarity. And then I would just, start sending these small emails to people, just write. I started calling them top of mind thoughts. It eventually became TOM, T-O-M.
So these would be internally to
Right?
to Myntra employees.
Internal to the employees, but about the larger context again.
Got it.
That, where India is, where internet is at, what's happening, why we are thinking about pivots, what kind of culture. So I'll just pick a topic. For example, recently I remember I've continued the habit for last 12, 13 years. Like recently, there's one Tom I wrote, it's called Hello Problem. The idea is, every time you encounter a problem, it's a great opportunity because, that's the only way you can apply yourself, you can grow, you can learn, you can do something different. So anyhow, I've been doing that Tom habit for a long period of time. And then, along the way, I love reading, for me, that's my biggest pastime. It's a way to relax, way to learn about things and so on. So health is one topic I've been very interested in. Actually, even before the productivity, as an entrepreneurial career, you realize limited amount of time. If you want to take care of your health, your family commitment, other interests, you have basically 10 to 12 hours to try to build a company. And without having some kind of, boosting your productivity, you cannot do it. So I started reading, learning, experimenting about that. And eventually, I think about 4 years ago, I thought, I know enough about this space. I should try to translate into an organized manual of sorts that other people can benefit from. That's what led to my first book.
You know, given that we are at the Bangalore Lit Fest, where a lot of the attention is on fiction and definitely, books of the imagination, so to speak, what genre would you place your writing in? Would it be inspirational writing or business history? How would you place your books? I mean, this is a question for all three of you.
I hope that my book is inspirational.
Definitely.
I think it's basically what the life of an entrepreneur is like. See, we all think that entrepreneurs are risk takers. Actually, it's exactly the opposite. Entrepreneurs are going out there to solve problems. And essentially what they are doing is going out there every day working to reduce the risk of failure. So it's really life stories. It's drama in real life that you're reading. That's probably the best way to classify the genre. Nice. Drama.
That's very interesting. Mukesh, how would you categorize?
I think the 2 books I've written, I would describe them, they're like how-to manual, but a lot of behind-the-scenes context. I don't want to just write, do this thing, this is great. Like why, what do we know about from science point of view, or history point of view, or stories point of view. But coming to fiction, I think fiction seems like a very high bar. I think, I think at least for me, I'll have to really work towards it. I think right now, these how-to manual books are a lot easier.
But you'll be very encouraged by something that was said at an earlier panel, where they say out of 10 books, the big successes would be non-fiction. Fiction would be the lesser ones. Now, there you are. So there's lots to encourage your writing, I'm sure. So I just want to, all three of you have mentioned the word discipline, which clearly anyone who is in the business of writing will understand that that's kind of like the first requirement, the first metric. So what would you think is common in this discipline that you need to bring to bear to building a business, running a company, and to maybe writing? Is it different? Is it same? I mean, it's a question for all three of you. You can take it whichever way. Yeah?
I learned the hard way while running Conserve, while I was chasing a compounded annual growth rate of 25% in sales and profits, that sales or top line is vanity, the bottom line or profits is sanity, but cash is reality. Cash is indeed king, but I learned that the hard way. And there it was a question of survival in business. You don't have cash, you might think you're profitable, but you need cash it's the lifeblood of the company. I think I would say that when it comes to writing, I again realized far too late, I didn't have his discipline of writing 600 words every day. So it became quite impossible sometimes to keep the ghosts of self-doubt out of my head. I fortunately had a wonderful co-author in Ashish Sen who bore the brunt of my indecision, my doubts. Every time I looked at the computer screen, I'd say, but who's going to read what I'm writing? Who would be interested in a manufacturing company? Who would be interested in a company which was just 1 crore when I took it over? But it was only by repeated conversations with Ashish, he would keep telling me, just begin to write, it doesn't matter. But by then, sometimes I would have allowed 3 or 4 months to pass and to come back to, with the same gusto and the passion and saying, I'm going to really finish this because it's my life work. It's a long, hard haul. So I suggest that if you're running a business and you're writing a book, have the same laser-sharp focus. It's needed.
Mukesh, you want to add to that? Is there?
No, absolutely. I think, typical book is, 80,000 to 100,000 words. And I think his, formula of 500 words a day, I think is probably as good as it gets. Just to show up every day. You write for, 6 months, you have your book, with 500 words a day. And I think, anything significant in life, requires compounding. Your little bit just keeps like a Absolutely. Little, your savings jar, that we used to do as a kids. Company building is a long-term journey. It takes, I think, my estimate, at least some of the digital world companies I've seen, anyone who's made it, it takes about 10 years. Now, 10 years of sustained effort requires habits, I think discipline is probably, implies a lot of willpower. I like the word habit, Once you make something habits, autopilot, you keep doing the same thing without even thinking about it. So for me, once the goal is clear, if one can break it down, these are 5 core habits I need. and then work towards that. No one can wake up one day saying, from today I'm going to have this habit. It will take a lot of effort over 4, 6, 8 weeks. But once it's a habit, then you don't worry about it.
That's interesting. So that's like a hack, right? Break it down to a habit, to doable small items that you can tick off. Yeah. And I think Rajesh has given us the best hack of all. Write every day, 500 words a day.
And I'll add to that. So one of the things which I do is, especially for writing, is figure out your time. And I think for a lot of us, probably it's early morning. It could be the early morning time. Figure out the previous night what you're going to write. I think that will make a very big difference, because you don't want to be waking up in the morning and staring at an empty screen thinking what to write. That is prime time. So write the first 1 or 2 sentences and the broad theme the previous night, so it becomes much easier to write the next morning, because the sort of the darkness and the silence that is there helps a lot. The second, I think, idea is that actually we can get a lot of learnings for ideas in conversations that we do. So if you make notes, for example, something that in a customer call, a phrase which was used, or something which a colleague said, that can trigger a short essay or a post, an idea of its own. And just write that down somewhere so you don't forget it. So there are ideas coming at it from, ideas on what to write are coming at it from all over the place. It's just for us to capture them. So I'd say it's RLTW. It's reading, listening, thinking, and writing. I think you get this flywheel going, everything else sort of falls into place.
Yeah, but I just want to add just a little bit to it, that I came across this quote a while back, which says something like, a blank page is, God's way of telling how difficult it is to be an author. And the great antidote to that, another variation of what Rajesh just said is, if you're about to finish a paragraph, I think one very famous author, I'm not recalling, but he will not finish the paragraph because he knows exactly what is to end. So next time when you show up, you just finish your 3-4 lines and you already run first 100 words. Absolutely. And start to get into flow state. So that's probably other hack.
That's a really interesting one. So this is incremental kind of effort, right? Where you just keep showing up every day and then finally it will add up at the end, which actually brings me to your book, Rajesh, Startup to Proficon. And both your companies are bootstrapped in an era where raising money is the biggest, goal of startup enterprise, so to speak.
I think I need to read his book.
So if you want to tell us a little bit more about how did you stay committed? I know you've stayed committed to your writing. How did you stay committed to the theory of bootstrapping your ventures?
Yeah. I think I have to first thank all the VCs and PEs who said no to me. I've tried to raise capital 50 times in my life. Okay. Sometimes they've rejected me, sometimes I've rejected them. But on a more serious note, because we've been profitable, there was no sense of urgency. And this is a lesson I learned from my father when I was starting my first company. And he said, I'll just say it in Hindi because it's sort of better impact. He said, "Bahar ka paisa nahi lena." I mean, this was in the mid-90s. There was no venture capital available. And if you're not going to take external capital, there's only one option. You got to be profitable pretty much from very early days. And I think that discipline helped me a lot, even as we're building Netcore out. We're now 25 years old, profitable. And the key is that the mindset of basically being profitable, if you can bring in, when you're beginning your venture, rather than when the investors force you to do it, I think you have a much, much better venture. You have greater control. You're working for your customers, not for your investors. You're not becoming an employee in your own company. And it's a much better life, I think. The key is think profitability. There's a path to profitability in every venture that we set up. It's probably manufacturing, etc. may require initial capital. But after that, there should not be successive rounds for cash burn. Use those for acquisitions, for growth, or expanding in new markets. Make a core of your business, which becomes the cash generator, which you can then invest in other areas.
And Mukesh, I'll come back to you, of course, on this topic. But I wanted to pick up a point that you mentioned about you not going for venture capital because it was not so easily available in the years that you were beginning as an internet entrepreneur. But I think Hema's example is just quite spectacular, I found it, to have raised venture capital in the 90s for a manufacturing company. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, I think it was just being at the right place at the right time. We were really fortunate. Well, the backstory was that my father-in-law had set up this business in digital energy meters, and that was to help people conserve energy at a time when the state electricity board in Karnataka was actually subsidizing companies to come forth and buy more power. So he had the vision that if people are going to keep using power at this rate, one day we're going to have a demand-supply gap, people will need accurate meters, they will need to save energy. So we were doing this concept sale. And my father-in-law and husband, both archetypal engineers, decided to stick with only design and manufacturing. The marketing was farmed out to some people in the extended family. That arrangement fell through overnight. And here we were. We had taken loans from the bank to build this factory, to invest in people, to invest in R&D. And we found ourselves not taking home our salaries as a family for 6 months, but we were paying the banks. We were paying employees' salaries, a far cry from some of the things that you see happening today. And just at that point, T. Thomas, who was the former chairman of Hindustan Lever, had just come back from Unilever in London from the board and set up India's first private venture capital fund. Before that, I think they were,
right?
Indus Venture. And he went to our marketing agents and asked them what they were doing. And they said, listen, we've been selling these products, but now we've terminated the agreement. He said, this is most unfair because he was your uncle. What is he doing now? They said, we don't know and we don't care. And he came looking for us. And for me, a graduate from IIM Calcutta, where I had studied all about HLL and distribution systems, to have him crossing our threshold and saying, would you like us to evaluate you for investment? It was something that was, you know, the stuff of dreams. So like I said, we didn't really have to go out and raise money. If we had tried, it wouldn't have been possible. We had accumulated losses. Our net worth had been wiped out. But when he came and looked at the integrity of the family, he said, here you are. And of course, the flip side, thank you. The flip side was that the family got diluted from 100% to 25%, but that goes with the turf. You go out looking for money, and like he said, you know, if you are getting in money to invest in R&D, marketing, and fund losses, you are bound to lose control. But then we got a slice of a bigger pie.
Mukesh, you really are the, you know, you're the master of the fundraising right now here. So you've got to tell us, venture or
not
bootstrap?
probably a distinction I'm very proud of. And I think so, I mean, a lot of it, I guess, comes down to trade-off. In an ideal world, if you can own your, you know, business 100% and be profitable and be your venture capital, that's nothing like it, right? So let's agree that's the best possible world. But now, how long does it take for you to get there? Sometime, you know, you need to, you know, initially when you're going to make profit, you're not going to make, you know, crores, right? You'll make 2 lakh profit, you know. So it's a very slow, gradual process. So one is to, you know, be okay with the fact that, you know, the one big trade-off is that to retain control of my company, I'm going to go really slow. Now that means while you are going slow, world is not going slow. Somebody else, you know, might have raised money, go faster. So you may not, you know, maybe someone can outrun you in that thing. So you change gears and do something else. So one is that. Second thing is, you know, some things, you know, if you look at, you know, I mean, the world has changed dramatically in the last, you know, 20 to 5 years. Everything from, you know, Google to Facebook to Amazon to, you know, Flipkart, Ola, Zomato, Swiggy, they're all venture funded because they're able to raise so much capital and build infrastructure. Now, infrastructure is not always manufacturing infrastructure. It's supply chain, logistic infrastructure, customer acquisition. Some things, you know, we talk a lot about network effect. But network effect only happens when you have a large network, and sometimes, you know, being able to get there first in advantage. So it's a major trade-off. I think if somebody, you know, in my opinion, ideal world would be raise enough venture capital, but not dilute below majority, so you retain control. Maybe raise money from people who have much longer horizon. You know, one big challenge happens, we see that people have, most funds are 10 year. By the time you raise money from them, they're already in their second, third, fourth year. So they have 6-7 year exit horizon. That produces, you know, inordinate pressure on the company to somehow keep growing, so you find exit and so on. So yeah, I think there is, you know, definitely both sides of equation, and each entrepreneur can look at it closely and make a choice, you know, that's better for them.
You mentioned infrastructure. So I guess you're referring to the digital highways that have been built out by the first generation of internet entrepreneurs. So now for the companies that are coming up, if there are aspiring startup entrepreneurs, for instance, out here listening to you, their challenges will be so much lesser than yours. do you think there is a better chance in today's environment to build bootstrap companies than it was, say, for your generation in the, the start of the 2010s, perhaps?
I think people have a lot more relevant examples and a lot of whole ecosystem is available. It depends on what you want to do now. AI, everyone's excited about it. But the cost of playing in AI is very difficult. I mean, the cost of building LLM is beyond the reach of most entrepreneurs. And so I think again the choices you make, what use case you are solving. You can be very regionally focused or very specific use case and so on. I think the trick is can you start really small, which does not require much money to reach your product market fit stage, which I'm pretty sure are numerous. India is land of opportunity. There are so many unsolved problems, and some problems will require very little startup capital. Some may require a lot of startup capital. So again, but what is your unique insight? What drives you? Where you have inherent right to win, and then make choice. If you need a lot of capital, it is available. But if you can figure out how to bootstrap with very little capital, that also that may turn out to be. And then 10 years from now, you may own the company, be profitable, and be in control of your destiny.
That's interesting because Hema also mentioned the point about losing ownership, or rather having your ownership diluted when you take in outside capital. Rajesh, would you want to weigh in on this? And given today's circumstances, right, to the point that Mukesh was making, that certain businesses will require large capital, while others can be built, probably can be bootstrapped. So how do founders or entrepreneurs, how should they approach this problem of also retaining control?
See, I think the key in this is a path to profitability. Because profits really give you the freedom. Otherwise, you're in a constant cycle of wanting to raise the next round. And a lot of the time of the founding team or the founder basically goes talking to investors. So I think whatever stage you are, and I think the points made have been very correct. There are some businesses which absolutely require capital. You don't have a choice. But I think what is required, what is key is you can't be 10 years in business, still be called a startup, and still be burning capital.
Okay.
I think that's what we are seeing in many companies today. I think there has to be a path to profitability, and the path to cash cannot be raising the next round. It's becoming harder. It's very clear now in the last at least year and a half, that every investor basically wants to see that path. So it's better to have clarity on how you are going to generate your first cash engine. Then that money can be used for further investments. If you're expanding internationally, etc., you will require capital. Now the question is, do you have one core, which is your profit engine, which can fund that, and therefore on that basis you could raise further investments. So it will vary for different types of businesses, but I think the key is have a clear plan for profitability. I think that is probably the big takeaway.
Really clearly the magic bullet. Sort of switching tracks a little bit, I thought, Hema, I'll come to you and ask you, as a woman leader of a company in the technology space, if not directly in digital or internet, what was your experience negotiating a sale of the company? Schneider famously bought over your family-owned business. You were the woman CEO. At the negotiating table, what were the learnings? What were the advantages, disadvantages?
Yeah, actually, again, with the exit to Schneider, we were quite fortunate. Firstly, the thought of getting an exit at a time when everybody else thought that I would, keep growing the business. Lots of people in the company just couldn't fathom why that was happening. I had personal and professional reasons to do that. So I actually had got an intellectual capital rating exercise done for the business, which valued our intangibles. And when we were looking at the risk factors that we were going to face in the years to come, we realized that the raters had given us a triple R, very, very high risk for our business recipe. And they actually mentioned the name of 4 multinationals who had come into India with a similar business model. All they didn't have was the kind of meters that we were making, but it would have been very easy for them to start making those kinds of meters. But they were looking at energy management, energy conservation, and I had already started energy consulting services, so we were in the sweet spot of acquisition for a whole bunch of companies. And if we hadn't decided to look for an acquirer, they would have just sort of slammed us out of the market. Competition had already become very, very stiff. Margins were getting eroded. So I decided to reach out to Schneider, and it was so strange that when I reached out to their Paris headquarters, the gentleman I met, their senior vice president, said, I've been watching the growth of Conserve for several years, And you're absolutely in a sweet spot because you have a 38% market share in digital meters, you're highly profitable, and you've added energy consulting services, which no metering company has done. So when I showed this matrix to the board, Conserve was right at the top. So it was like a meeting of minds, and I must say the experience was very pleasant. I've written a whole chapter about how the integration was seamless, a lot of respect, and we requested Ashok, my husband, and I, who held most of the capital at that time, the equity, we made just one request. We said, look, when we sell, don't keep us in there for very long. You know, we don't want golden handcuffs. They were very appreciative. They said, would you change your mind? We said, no. So when we signed the SPA, they just locked us in for 1 year. And in that 1 year, they made sure we had no operational roles to play at all. It would have been quite galling for us because we had, raised the company from ground up like a baby. They, in fact, put us in global advisory roles, and it was terrific. And I think the gender thing didn't come into it at all.
I was just going to say, was that like great negotiating by the woman CEO at the head of the company? So Mukesh, I just wanted to come to you, not just two very successful companies, two great books. How do you do this?
500 words a day or equivalent. I mean, so if I can do 500 words, it will only take 6-7 months. I have taken 2 years each, which means there are unfortunately long stretches of time I am not able to write, or I guess not disciplined enough to write. But yeah, I think if you just keep coming back at it, book kind of writes itself. It's a matter of just showing up and spending that half an hour to 1 hour. Sometimes, there are times where I feel like I have nothing to write. I don't feel like writing. But I just show up, I open the screen and open a blank page and sit there. After 5 minutes, automatically something starts coming. And worst case, you can throw it out the window next day. So I think it's just a matter of just showing up. But for me, look, I think the benefit of writing at least this non-fiction type of books is that also forces you to read and research. So for both of my books, first one, Productive Book, No Limits, and second, Hacking Health, like between me and my team, we would have gone through 100, 150 books. And we have summary of all of those. So that is an excellent exercise. Having to learn so much in depth about a topic is a reward in it itself. Even if the book was never published, I just feel privileged that getting an opportunity to study something in depth is great. I like studying, researching. I'm curiosity about things. So it's a good forcing function. Last thing I'll say, if you look at any typical non-fiction book, most authors take between 2 to 10 years. These people are, top of their profession. They are, professors or journalists. They care deeply about a topic. They talk to the world's best people, and you can buy 10 years worth of their time for 400 or 500 rupees. I do not know any single, bigger ROI investment anyone can make.
I just have one last question, and then I think we can open it out for audience questions. Do you need to be passionate about a topic to both write about it and to also turn that into a business?
No, 100%. I think passion is the core of everything. You can't sustain, like building a business take, 10 plus years. If you don't enjoy on a daily basis, there's no way you can, think about a pot of gold at the end of 10 years and go through something. So I think, every single startup that at least I admire or I've seen up close, I think there is somebody there, very deep passion who cares about, I think, Jeff Bezos used this, phrase, tap dancing to work. I think he was quoting Warren Buffett. I think unless you are in a job, or an entrepreneurial venture or a book where you literally tap dancing to work, probably should do something else.
Wow, that's a wonderful thing.